Hello and welcome to this video. Today I'm going to make a little kitchen accessory haul. Now this is another one of these projects, kind of like the little cup with the vines I made. That is going to be just a useful little tool in my kitchen. And again, it has to do with sauce bottles. I have a lot of sauce bottles that require you to peel off this little foil on top, and in most cases it's so hard to peel off that you have to basically cut it off, and instead of that I'm mainly just poking a hole in it with a toothpick or skewer, just so that it has the width of the spout thing that the bottle comes with. And I found that that is actually much better than trying to get off the foil completely. And you can still pretty much completely empty the sauce bottle, and if it's almost empty you can still, if you need to, cut out the little foil and just scrape the leftovers off. So, I thought, instead of having skewers laying around all the time and maybe accidentally throwing them away because I don't remember what I've used them for, or like little toothpicks, I decided to make a very simple tool for this purpose and to decorate it to fit into my kitchen vibes. And that is where this owl comes into play. I started off with a basic shape and then I added two holes in the different skewer sizes, one for toothpicks, one for these a bit larger kebab skewers. And then I'm going to make the body, and afterwards it's time for details. I decided to go very simple since I knew I had to hand wash this owl probably multiple times if I get sauce on it and things like that. So I decided I'm going to add details but not too many, just so I can keep it clean easily. And that means I just added the little face plate thing that I textured with my stylus tool, and then I also add some little holes for the eyes later. And as for the wings, I start up with these teardrop shapes that I just press in, add some bacon bond in each case, and just shape them like wings and make sure I'm smoothing them out. And I'm also very careful that I'm always pre-baking things in between steps, because I already know that at this scale, if I want to add any amount of details at all to a piece, I would smush the other side completely likely. Which, yes, has happened way too many times, so, better be careful than regret it later. But yeah, for the wings it was a lot of smoothing, detailing, and I decided to just go very simple. First I wanted to add individual feathers, then I just decided to make them look a bit more furry / fluffy, and just went over it with a little bit of this texture with my silicone shaper tool. And I think it actually works out really nicely. It definitely has this fluffy-esque feeling that I wanted it to have, without me having to go in and spend hours to do feather details. And then, in the end, they will probably not come out how I wanted to. I think that's one thing I really would love to practice in the future, making individual feathers on a sculpture and things like that. But for now, for this one, since I already went simple with the face and stuff like that, this was, I think, more of an ideal outcome. Next up for my owl were the ears and the little other face detail things, the eyebrow details. So I roll out some very thin pieces of clay that are gonna be snaked, and then I press them flat on one side, shape them kind of rounded the ears, and then cut off the excess. And then I just go in with my shaper tool and blend the edges. Again, all I'm adding here after I bake the steps are always gonna be secured with bacon bond. This just helps the clay to stick. On some types of clay you don't really need it, because it sticks to itself really well even after baking. But with me using Sculpting medium here, it's just way easier. I also chose this clay and not colored clay because I knew I wanted more of a naturalistic look. So I knew I wanted to paint it Although it's gonna be still like not as detailed and more like of an abstract, free, like suggestive kind of style of painting. And after I added the ears, I added the beak too. Again, very simple, just like a little triangle piece that I blended in on the sides. And then the eyes are gonna go into that same socket that I formed previously, just some tiny little balls of clay that I'm pressing flat. And then lastly, I'm also going to add feet, and I'm just using my blade here to cut out the individual like little segments. I know that owls have different like claw shapes. I just decided to go very simple and add like 3 claws in front that you could see. And with all of this, I'm always using my silicone shaper to shape these, and I'm trying to, especially with those finer details, to keep them flat and not too protruding, because again, it's gonna be an item that's gonna be used a lot, and I don't want anything to break off, especially not the toes. And then once everything's done, I'm smoothing it over with alcohol. I didn't do that in the previous pieces because they had a lot of texture, but these smoother pieces, they show all the fingerprints much more. And then it was into the oven for one last time, and then it was time to make the base. Of course, with the skewers on the bottom of the owl, it would be hard to just plop it into the kitchen, and I wanted to make sure that it keeps kind of clean. So I decided to make a little tree stump base. This is actually why I chose this idea, because I knew that I needed to make a 2-part figure, and the first thing that came to mind was actually an owl on tree stump for some reason. Probably also because I may have played a lot of Zelda recently, and you know, especially in like Ocarina of Time and Majora's Mask and stuff, you have a lot of encounters with owls. So that may also have been a slight like inspiration for this. But yeah, the tree stump, again, very simple. I'm just poking a hole. For these holes that are gonna like hold the other side of the skewers, I made sure to have them really loosely fitting, so I wiggled the owl around in there a little bit, because I knew that if it was as tight as it was an owl, I would probably always lose the skewer parts in the tree stump and have to pick them out, put them back into the owl holder socket, and then, you know, I think that would be really annoying if I just want to quickly open like a sauce bottle or something. So having them a bit looser so I can just plug out the owl without losing any of those was, you know, I think the ideal plan for that. And then the tree stump just basically like a roll log where I just pinched like a little bit of the bottom part to get the roots, or to hint at the roots. And then I just indented the middle with my silicone shaper, added like the little rings, and then all the bark details. Again, not going to like have them stick out too much. If this was like a model I would put on my desk or something, I would, but again, since I knew I probably needed to wash it once or twice in my life, I just really wanted to make sure that there wouldn't be any things breaking off, just to give it a bit more longevity. And then after all that, again, I went in to just get the details a bit more smooth with alcohol and get the little tiny loose bits of clay off. And then it was actually time for painting. Of course, conveniently, the owl already had a little hole in the bottom which meant I could hold the skewer and paint it. I gave all of the pieces a little like very cheap gesso base coat just to make sure that the paint sticks, since I smoothed it so much in some parts with alcohol. And then I'm just dabbing on a lot of different colors. I'm going in with like a dark gray for the beak, brown around the eyes, and then just some cream and gray tones and some more brown around the body. I'm spotting that because owls have this like really spotted feather pattern, so I'm trying to kind of mimic that, but not as much with any rhyme or reason as an actual owl looks, just a bit more roughly, just to give it more of this like hand-painted, almost porcelain-esque look, you know? And then for the eyes, I'm first adding some black, and later I'm going to add some yellow and oranges, just to give it a little bit of a glowy eye effect and some highlights. I also have these really pretty glowy eyes, and I just really wanted to show that in this sculpture, and I think I managed pretty well. At that point I also decided to shade things down just a little bit, and since I already knew I wanted to add a wash, I'm just adding some spots with a less diluted black and just wiping that off to give this darker brown, especially around the wings, before adding the rest of the wash to the body. I just wanted to have the wings pop out a bit more because in most cases they are a bit darker, and you know, having a little more potent mixture will just stain the clay a bit more. And then I just went in with the lighter wash on top of that and just wiped the excess off, and that worked out perfectly. The tree stump was honestly very simple. I used this buff sandy color in the middle, and then just some of this very nice leather brown on the outside. All the paints I'm using, by the way, are Vallejo Model and Game colors. So they are drying very quickly and they are a bit more sturdy than most other paints you put on top, like general acrylics, since they are already made for miniature painting. And then of course the black wash to highlight all the crevices on the tree stump. And lastly, I'm going to add some matte spray varnish on top, just to seal everything in, because I don't really want paint in my food or anything. So I added 4 layers of spray varnish just to make sure everything is sealed. I went for an acrylic based one that is a bit more light fast, in hopes that it will be nice and sturdy and keeping the colors safe. Although I haven't really noticed that any of the Vallejo colors change over the years, even in sunlight. This is just, you know, again, a precaution to keep it looking nice. And after all that, this tiny owl was finished. I think I went a bit heavy with the highlights on the eyes, but I still think it's super cute. And I love these natural, brushed on looking colors. I think they fit it quite nicely, and they work super well. As I said, I added 2 styles of toothpicks, and one of them I've always put to the side into the tree stump, while the other one sits in the owl, just because it's really hard to use them when they're both sticking out the bottom, because one mostly interferes with the cap. But here you can see how both of them look, and it actually works again super well. I haven't had any issue with any sauce bottles, and it looks so cute in my kitchen. It fits perfectly with the little container thing I made before to hold my sauce bottles upside down. And again, it solves a very niche problem. But you know, if you have to do that a lot at some point, you just may wanna spice up the little tools you use, and especially in this case I think that, you know, worked super well. But let me know in the comments down below what you think of this little project, and also let me know if you have any items in your house that you use constantly but they're very bare bones, and let me know if you would in the future or already have given them a new optic so they fit more into your household and don't look as boring or simple as they did before. And of course, as always, I hope you have a great day. See you next time. Bye bye!